Hi, everyone. As I mentioned before, I'm Greg Belkin. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Flosum. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Appreciate your time today. Today's webinar is all about key considerations you need to know about backing up Salesforce data and guidance on how to speed up the restore process. As we all know, losing crucial Salesforce data can be disastrous. Customizations, integrations, reports, even custom code are not automatically protected by Salesforce. This means that obviously data loss can threaten your business connectivity, cause legal headaches, cybersecurity threats, and nobody wants that. So we're here today to talk about it. I'm Greg Belkin, and I'm joined today by Keith West, who is our technical director for Flosum Backup and Archive. He and I are going to have a totally awesome presentation for you today. Keith, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the agenda. Today's agenda is pretty simple. We're going to start off talking a little bit about why you should back up your Salesforce org, what areas of responsibility Salesforce covers, and what areas of responsibility you and as an organization must cover. Then I'm going to hand it over to Keith, and we're going to look at the data, trends and charts. How is the industry prioritizing backup solutions? How comfortable are they with the tools? Are they ready for a disaster? God forbid one occur. And then after that, Keith is going to talk about the 4 key considerations to make when strategizing on your Salesforce backup, and one on how to speed up your Salesforce recovery time. Finally, after that's done, I'm going to take a very, very quick moment to tell you a little bit about Flosum, the backup and archive solution that helps orgs safely, securely, and reliably automate the backups, restorations, and archivals of your Salesforce data and metadata. And I promise that section will be very short. Just a quick housekeeping note before we get started. Keith and I really want this presentation to be interactive. So feel free to submit questions at the bottom of your screen. There's a little box that says Q&A. Feel free to pop one up in there, and we'll try to get to it. The second thing I would say is that we want to keep this presentation interactive. We want this to be your presentation. You guys are giving up time to watch Keith and I today, so we want to keep things interactive. So that, therefore, we're going to make it interactive and fun, and we're going to have a couple poll questions. Feel free to weigh in, and Keith and I will be able to kind of gauge the results real time and kind of work them into our presentation. So the next question is, why should you back up your Salesforce org, right? So like it or not, good data is at the center of almost every business decision you make. I mean, everybody knows that, right? I mean, it's the lifeblood of what flows, of making our organization flow. We make customer decisions, we make buying decisions, supply chain management decisions, employees decisions about who we hire, and moving folks around the organization. It's all based on data. So obviously we need to protect it. We need a presentation, we need a layer of protection in case of a disaster, either whether it's malicious or accidental. And let's face it, accidents happen. I mean, that things are deleted accidentally, things are misplaced. It happens. It's being proactive about it and making sure that you're in a position that when those kind of things happen, you're in a good position. Additionally, in addition to protecting against data, there's also the legal and compliance issue. It's not enough to be protected when you lose data. Oftentimes we are asked by regulatory bodies or different organizations that are considering working with us, are you protected? What is your status in case things go wrong? This may be part of a contractual obligation. Maybe part of a protection against litigation, maybe IP protection, business continuity planning. So there's different ways to look at the importance of why backing up Salesforce data is super important. Now, you may be thinking, well, Salesforce automatically backs up all my data, right? They're SaaS, right? No problems, all good. Not so much. Salesforce is a big organization with a big infrastructure, for sure. But when it comes to backing up data, there's a shared responsibility in place that has effect on them and effect on us. Salesforce does not automatically back up and protect data and metadata. That's really important to know. Although, the platform is, very big and fancy and wonderful and has state-of-the-art infrastructure and guarantees uptime, it does not protect crucial information that we work with on a day-to-day basis. That includes any customizations that we do, integrations, reports, records, files, custom code. Those are all things that are important to what we do and are not automatically protected by Salesforce. And this obviously exposes organizations to the potential loss of data, which threatens the way we do business on a day-to-day basis, and can cause potential problems. So again, it's important to understand. I mean, Salesforce manages the configuration, management, and the securing of applications, network controls, physical infrastructure. It's up to us, the users, to be responsible for the data stored, the backups, devices, accounts, data governance, and access management. Salesforce is an organization that will come right out and recommend a data backup solution. That's a very important distinction and one that everybody should be aware of.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yep. Over to you, Keith.
For introducing that. I'm going to go ahead and jump now into how the industry is prioritizing backup strategies. And first, let's go ahead and start with our first poll question here. Do you have an existing Salesforce data backup tool in place? And that poll question should be coming up here shortly. There we go. Okay.
It'd be interesting to see the results here, Keith. How many, the importance of having a backup tool in place, how many people are aware of, what the responsibilities are, and it'd be interesting to see the mix.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Do we have answers here? Do we want to move on to
Yep.
okay.
All right.
Okay, what did you get on the?
It looks like we have about 20% yes, 80% no.
Okay, that actually lines up with exactly the numbers I had in my head. So we have a good mix here today on today's crowd. I often say 80% of the world, Salesforce world, has not got a backup system. They need one. So let's move on here, just so I can get my screen. Okay, so we at Flosum commissioned a company called Phenomena to do a survey and report for us on the current state of Salesforce data backup. Everything from how many organizations have an existing Salesforce solution for backup to their confidence in recovering from disaster recovery. They went out and they split the survey into 3 different groups of people: Salesforce users, so that kind of includes admins and users of Salesforce, and then the technical evaluators. Those are the people who at a company who decide, is this tool really what it needs to be? And this is going to be your security and compliance architects, your Salesforce architects, and other groups who have a focus and concern on meeting certain criteria for backups, and then decision makers. So those are the directors and executives who actually make decisions about Salesforce and are held responsible at some level for whether Salesforce is backed up properly and the data and metadata are backed up properly. So this is the report that we had run. These are the results from that report, or these are results from that report. Do you currently have an existing Salesforce backup solution? In this response, there was a response of 67% yes and 33% no. So a little bit different than what we saw today. We were seeing a 20-80 in the other direction. A lot of people actually do feel like they have an existing Salesforce backup and solution in place. And I think that is the reason that we get these sorts of perceptions like this, is because it is from the Salesforce admin or maybe the Salesforce users, and there's an assumption that there's a backup in place, but there isn't necessarily a backup. Like you said at the very beginning, sometimes people just assume Salesforce has this backed up for me. And so this is more a perception. So they feel like they do have some sort of Salesforce data backup solution in place, and that is protecting data and configurations in the Salesforce ecosystem or their Salesforce orgs. That leads us to, have you tested up a backup solution in the last 6 months? I regularly ask customers the question, when is the last time you did a disaster recovery drill on your Salesforce system? And normally the answer is absolute crickets. It just isn't done. It's not something to do. So even if there's a perception of, 2/3 of the people asked said, I think there is a backup in place, there definitely is not any consistency on testing that backup and making sure that a disaster recovery has actually been accomplished. Sometimes the perception of have you tested your backup solution is, hey, I reached out to my IT team and they were able to recover the data for me, is kind of the answer. Maybe they got it from the recycle bin. Maybe they got it. I'm not sure. Maybe they do actually have a backup process in place. But I think there is a level of perception that that we have tested our backup. Again, I'm not sure that that's actual truth. So that leads us to our next point here is that we asked them, how would you rate your enterprise backup solution in place? And across those three categories, users, decision makers, and the people who technically are responsible for implementing Salesforce, they felt like nearly half of all those respondents said that their view of the existing backup solution was average or below average or poor. That's a bad number, but it gets even worse because 63% of users, Salesforce users, that's the admins and the users of Salesforce, felt like it was very good or excellent, whereas the technical evaluators and the decision makers actually rated that a lot lower and said 2/3 of them said we think it's average and lower. So there's a significant difference between the perception of what is going on with Salesforce and what is really backed up and what is actually has been dealt with as far as a disaster recovery plan and testing that plan and the reality that's in place. There's a strong misunderstanding of what the perception is with that. So reality is that all these things point to the fact that there is, number one, a need for a third-party backup product, and there is a right way and a wrong way to buy a third-party backup product to make sure that it meets the requirements of your technical evaluators and decision makers. So that leads us naturally into the wrong way to choose a third-party backup app. Now, you're reading the slide and you're thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, criteria one, look at the websites of the top backup apps. That seems to make sense. Compare their features. Yeah, I want to compare features and then buy based on the features that you like. This is the way people buy things. This is the way people buy third-party backup apps. And you're sitting here saying to yourself, yes, Keith, that's exactly how you do it. And I would propose that no, it's not. It's not how you do it. You really, there are more criteria. There are better criteria to use when choosing a backup app because it's not just about features you like, features you think you'll use. There's other things you need to consider. So let's go look at the right way now to buy a third-party backup app. And the criteria number one is, what is your compliance and security needs? Remember, we're not talking about the users and admins of Salesforce. We're talking about the decision makers and the technical implementers of Salesforce. They are the ones who lay down what is your compliance and security needs and what does a backup app need to provide for you. They are a key place to go find that information. You're going to find that either through your architects, your security architects and your Salesforce architects, or through your corporate information security office or data protection office. So those are the places that would provide the real requirements for what a backup app needs to do. They also provide your recovery point objective. We're going to talk about in a minute what that really is and what a recovery point is and how often you need to have a backup. We're also going to talk about recovery time objective, how fast you have to recover stuff. So we'll go into those in more detail, but all those things are the real criteria of a third-party backup app. Now, there are business needs you have on top of that. And of course, you need to go look at other features and choose the other features you want. But first, a third-party backup app has to meet criteria 1, 2, and 3. Then you go look at other features and things you want to add on to that. Otherwise, you really don't have a backup tool and you can't recover from it. And you can't prove that you can recover from it with a disaster recovery drill because you don't have the basics of a backup app. Okay, so let's get into consideration number one. First, let's make sure we're all on the same page. And the first consideration is whenever you have a conversation with people about Salesforce backups, let's jump into a poll question, another poll question. Do you have an existing need for archiving Salesforce data, such as slow system performance or a lack of additional data storage space in Salesforce? Yes or no? And the poll question's up there.
Yep. It looks like it's a little bit more even than our first poll question. So the moment it looks like just actually, yeah, now about 50-50, 50% yes, 50% no.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
We're going to touch on archiving in here in just a little bit. So hold that thought. I won't leave you hanging too long, but we have a little bit to talk about before we get to archiving here. So let's go ahead and cover though the key concepts around backup and archive for Salesforce. A lot of people have a misunderstanding about what these words and actually mean, or these concepts actually mean. And it's good for us to have that clear in our mind when we go talk to our information security office or our data protection office and talk to our architects and are trying to find a solution that actually meets the needs and requirements that you have. We're focusing today on backup, but we are going to talk a little bit about archive too. But let's first talk about these key concepts. Data. Data is all the information in your Salesforce system. You have a customer relationship management system for a reason. You need to manage opportunities. You need to manage and move those towards getting converted. You have leads that need to get converted to contacts. You have a service center who is working on cases for customers. You have a marketing team that is doing marketing. All this information is in Salesforce as a record. So opportunities, accounts, and all those sorts of things are records. The data in Salesforce is the text in those actual records that you look at. So when you look at the fields on an opportunity, you look at the fields on a case, you know what's going on. That's the data in Salesforce. Metadata is the business logic or the configurations for that business logic that makes Salesforce work smoothly for your organization. So think about things like triggers and flows, and think about even where you set up new fields on a record and maybe set up some policies for how that field should get filled in, and also Lightning Web Components, Apex code. These are all the things that make Salesforce work the way you expect it to work. So you have a base set of functionality or a base set of metadata in Salesforce, and Salesforce gives you a lot of flexibility through declarative methods and coding methods to change the business logic to how your business runs and works. So that is the metadata of Salesforce. Backup is a safe duplicate of your data. It is a copy of your data on Salesforce stored preferably off-site or off of Salesforce platform for security and safety reasons, to have a copy somewhere besides on Salesforce, because if Salesforce goes down, you need your data. So it's a safe duplicate of your data and instructions, so metadata, while keeping the original intact on Salesforce. Now, there's a misconception about backups. A lot of people think backups should be kept forever. There's nothing wrong with keeping your backups for a long time, but generally backups have a short lifespan. You would use a backup within a few days, maybe a couple weeks. On outside cases, maybe within 90 days, but backups really have a short lifespan. It's just the most recent copy and a frequent copy of your system, your full Salesforce system, so that you have what you need in case you have a data loss event or a data corruption event. You can restore your data back to where it was. So backups are a duplicate of your data and metadata, and it's generally a short-lived idea. Now, archive tends to be a safe copy of a subset of your data on Salesforce. So that was a scenario we just asked you guys about. I have my Salesforce system is slowing down. I've got a decade's worth of data in there, millions and millions of cases that I just don't need anymore. No way to get rid of them, but I still need to keep them around for compliance and data retention purposes. If I ever have a legal recall on that information, I need to be able to get back to it, but it's just slowing my system down. My reports are running slow. My refactoring of sharing rules is running slow. Just generally, system is miserably slow compared to what it used to be. Generally, that means you have more data in Salesforce than you need or should have, and a lot of that data is obsolete for the purpose of Salesforce for customer relationship management. You just need to keep it around for compliance reasons, retention of data. Also, the thing to understand about archives is it's a subset of your data, and you take it off of your system. You make a copy of it, you basically do a backup of it, and then you actually delete it from Salesforce. So it's gone from Salesforce, but it's recoverable. So it's out there. The other purpose for that is Salesforce charges a lot for data space. So if you're running up against your limits on data space with a lot of attachments and all that kind of stuff, archive would be a subset of data. You use archive to pull out a subset of your data and save off attachments and emails and cases and things that you don't need in your system for day-to-day operations. So that's an archive. Archives tend to be long-term. People tend to keep an archive for up to 10 years, again, for data retention purposes and for the ability to recover that data if they ever need to see it. Restore is just getting things back to Salesforce after you have a data loss or data corruption, or let's say there's a legal recall. I need all the emails and attachments from these people over this period of time because we have a legal case that we have to deal with, and we need that information pulled back into Salesforce so we have access to it. Or you have had a data loss event or data corruption event, and you need to restore that data back to where it was. So these are the basic concepts around Salesforce, and it's important that we understand these before we move forward so that everybody's on the same page. Consideration number 2, meet your compliance and security requirements. We are in a world where the term cybersecurity is a big word nowadays. We're seeing that the C-suite, the C-level executives in the company are being held responsible for having inappropriate cybersecurity policies and for not enforcing those cybersecurity policies. When there's data losses, the C-level executives can be held personally responsible and can be personally fined, and it follows them from job to job. It's not like leaving this company will make this go away. It's going to follow me around as a C-level executive. So very serious situation, very serious to make sure data doesn't get lost through people taking it and all that. So the compliance and security is very important. What's my encryption look like? Do I have SOX compliance? On the GDPR side, do I have the ability to remove data from my system if a person requests it, the right to be forgotten? There's just a lot to think about on compliance and security. And again, you need to go to your information security office or your data protection office and sort out what your compliance and security risks are and how they deal with those. And for example, bringing your own key, making sure that data is stored properly in your backup system, making sure you have the ability to forget somebody if they don't want to be remembered, just all that stuff. There's a very unique situation at your company, and probably based a lot on your industry, how much requirements you have, but there's always data protection needs. There's always information security needs. And so that's the first thing you have to take into consideration and make sure those people are involved when you're in the buying process, and make sure that your backup tool actually meets those requirements for you. Consideration 3 is meet your recovery point objective. Here's another important concept with backups and when you run backups is here we have this timeline represents, the green line represents the Salesforce org. Because it's green all the way across, this org has no data loss or data corruption in it. And we are running composite backups on a regular basis on this Salesforce org. The recovery point is simply the amount of time between backups. So that information will come from your information security office or your data protection office. How often do you have to back up data on your Salesforce org? And what you're really saying, the question you're really answering here is, how much data can I afford to lose? We've been doing backups since 1960. We've been doing recoveries since 1960 with the old style full and incremental backups. We've completely reinvented that with composite backups here at Flosum. But again, the recovery point here is how much time between backups. So in the 60s, it was always, and until very recently in Salesforce, it was always, we'll do a full backup every month and we'll do incremental backups every week. So what you're really saying is I could lose a week's worth of data and be okay out of my Salesforce system. And we don't think that's enough. We think that at a minimum, people should be backing up daily with a full backup of Salesforce. And we actually have the ability to do backups down to every hour. So you can run 24 backups a day on our composite backup with our backup and archive product. But recovery point is how much data can I afford to lose? And we have some customers out there who tell us, you know what, Keith, we have to recover, or we have to have a recovery point that's very small, because if we lost an hour's worth of data, we'd be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in that hour, and we have to be able to recover quickly. So recovery point becomes very important. How fast do you need to recover? And sometimes that is down to an hour, sometimes a little bit less than an hour. So that's your recovery point. Time between backups and how much data can I afford to lose? Meet your recovery time objectives. This is the other big thing you have to know about backups is how fast can I restore? So in this Salesforce org, you can see that we were doing our backups. We had a green status, which means no data loss or corruption loss, until we did have a corruption or loss event that started and our system went to corrupted or data lost. And at some point that corruption or loss event stopped. Now, that is, you know, you figured it out, something was happened and you stopped it from happening, or you figured out when it started and when it stopped. From the moment that you stop losing data or stop the corruption of data to the time that you recover the data to where it should be is your recovery time. So you know something's going on, and now you have to recover that data within a certain amount of time to get your Salesforce system back to where it has no corruption, no data loss. That's your recovery time. So these are two key metrics. It's all well and good to have a great recovery point objective every hour, but if it takes you 3 weeks to restore your data, that doesn't help you much because because while you didn't lose a lot of data, it took you a long, long time to get it back. And we're finding in cybersecurity policies that people are not allowed to have that kind of time. Like we're talking about hours and minutes even for recovery of specific data within your Salesforce system. So recovery point objective and recovery time objective, plus your considerations. Now, so how do we speed up your Salesforce recovery time? This is a huge topic for people. Let's go ahead and jump into this bonus. So that's the 4 points. Understanding your Salesforce system. So you know what backups are, you know what archives are, you know what metadata is, you know what data is, you know what a restore is. Then you know what your compliance requirements are. That's step number 2, item number 2. Item number 3 is what your required recovery point objective and what your required recovery time objective. Now, let's take you one step further. As I talked about, it can take a long time to recover. Let me show you how to speed up your Salesforce recovery time to minutes and hours instead of days and weeks. So I've been in this IT for 27 years. I have been in as a data architect and a architect working on the Salesforce system for 15 years now, and a lot of experience doing this. A technical architect, actually driving products, maintenance weekends, preparing stuff for new business functionality in Salesforce and moving it in over a weekend so that there's more business functionality in Salesforce and it works the way you want it to. Across my entire experience with Salesforce over the last 15 years, the most common recovery scenario is you know when a data corruption or loss started and you know when it finished. A lot of people want to go down the road of, well, what if I need to restore my entire Salesforce? I'm only aware of one time where that would have even been helpful, and that was back in 2022 when Salesforce had a major issue across several nodes and lots of backup Salesforce systems were down. And I'm not sure that a backup necessarily would have helped them in that situation anyways. But that is a rare event. And we can get into complexities of that if you want to talk to us about it, but that's a rare event. The most common event is somebody messed up. They either put a new trigger in and it was changing fields as it should be changing fields, but it's changing into the wrong values or incorrectly changing the records that it shouldn't have changed. I put a new trigger in, I implemented it after a couple, 3 days, started noticing it. Oh my gosh, this is not what I want it to do. So I'm going to stop the trigger. I'm going to stop the corruption of data and turn it off. The other, and this is the most I've ever seen, the biggest thing I've seen is migration weekend started. So we've got a batch of new functionality we want to roll out to Salesforce users. We take a backup on Thursday night. Friday afternoon, we start migrating those changes in. So you're changing a lot of metadata. You're loading a lot of new records. You're changing the database in Salesforce, adding new fields, removing fields, migrating data between fields. And then sometime on Sunday, you declare it a good or bad. And if it's good, you move forward. And every now and again, there's a situation where a migration failed and you need to back it out so people can get back to work. These are the most common data corruption and loss, the types of events where you know where it started, you know where it finished. So what does that mean, or what does that mean to us is, well, okay, so let's go back and look at that. I'm going to throw a couple more ideas here on you. Your recovery point, remember we have a recovery point objective. That was your last backup. That was the last backup of good data before you had the corruption is your recovery point. That's why you have a recovery point objective. And I call the point where you stop the trigger or you needed to back out of a failed migration. I call that your known corruption point. That's where your data corruption stopped or your data loss stopped. So that's kind of a new coin of terminology, but we call that the known corruption point. Now, from that known corruption point, or the point that all that data stopped, data loss stopped or corruption stopped, you have your recovery time. And looking here at the steps of recovery, you have to figure out what data was corrupted or lost. Let's say a trigger affected 3 million records, and it put the wrong field in 3 million records. How can you possibly identify all of that and know exactly what has changed and what it is? It's a tough way to get that list. So you got to sort that out. Or maybe you had something even more major. You had a migration, your migration weekend failed. So you not only do you have wrong data in fields, you have data in the wrong places, you've migrated to other fields, you've removed fields, you've added fields, you've loaded data. How do you even know? And I've seen this happen. I've been on projects where this has happened, and you don't, it takes you hours, days to even figure out what the corruption was and what was lost. So the next step is figure out how to restore that data. Okay, so now you know what you lost. You think you know what you lost. Now you got to figure out how to restore it. Can I restore it manually? Does my backup tool restore it back for me? I have no idea what the next steps are. I need to map that out and come up with a combination of automated and manual processes to get that data back to where it is. That can take hours and days. So we haven't even started restoring data yet. We've had to figure out what was corrupted and lost. We had to figure out how to restore that corruption or loss. And then we actually start the process of restoring the data. And depending on what your backup app is, or if you have a backup app or not, you may have a very manual process ahead of you for the next a few weeks. And I've seen this happen. And so then what I didn't do is put some cross fingers over on the right-hand side where you actually get your Salesforce org back to where it was, because when you're doing this kind of stuff, you're just kind of hoping and praying that I really get my data back to where it was, and that this migration happens, because there's lots of possibles for manual error in this whole entire process. So this is a pretty common scenario that I've seen for recovering from data loss or data corruption due to migration weekends. And it can take a long time to get there, and a lot of staring at each other like, what do we do next? So with Flosum's backup and archive, recovering with Flosum's backup and archive, we have those same two concepts. The recovery point, that's your last composite backup before the corruption happened. Your known corruption point. As soon as you know that your corruption or data loss is stopped, you run a manual composite backup. And so you can see we got a new one injected there in the middle. And we know, because we've bookended our data loss and data corruption, we know exactly what's changed between those 2 points. And I'll tell you why that's significant here in a minute. And we take 2 steps out. Our tool knows exactly what changed. It knows exactly what to recover. And all you have to do is choose your recovery point, choose your known corruption point, and click restore, and it puts your system back to the way it was before. Now, this could take a little bit of time, but it generally happens under a few hours. I mean, those kind of changes typically are, and usually a lot less, like minutes. It's usually restored back in minutes or an hour or two, not hours and hours or days or weeks. So buying the right tool, choosing the right features will make your life so much easier when you have the real problems of corruption and data loss, and restoring that back and making sure you hit your recovery point objective, make sure you're hitting your recovery time objective, because the backups on this line are an hour apart, right? So we have a real easy way to get back to where we are. Okay, so let's talk about that in detail now. The benefits of Flosum's composite backup: fastest recovery time. It saves hours, days, and weeks because there's zero time required to figure out what has changed and how to restore it. You completely cut 2 steps out of your process. Flosum knows what to restore. It's just a couple clicks to choose your recovery point and your corruption point, known corruption point, and click restore is running. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to know what it is. The app knows. The Flosum knows how to restore. It has the logic to properly restore your data is already built in. It includes managing the restoration of all parents and all children and their relationships. Everything gets put back to exactly the way it was before the corruption or data loss. It allows you to do a granular filtering. So let's say you only need to recover 2 fields on your cases because the trigger was messing up 2 fields on your cases. You can choose which, you already know which cases are affected because you've got your known corruption point, you've got your recovery point. You already can just choose to restore cases, and you can even go a step further down and say, I only want these 2 fields restored. So think about how much that speeds up your recovery time because you're only restoring what you need to recover on the system. And additionally, we also have the functionality to turn off your Salesforce automation. So the data goes back exactly the way it left the system, and you don't have to wait around for trigger to fire 20 times every time you load a record. So this is the benefits of our composite backup. So make sure you have the 4 things under control. And if you really want to get a super fast recovery time objective, this is how you do it. I'm going to pass it back on over to you to tell us a little bit about Flosum, Greg.
All right, sounds good. Keith, that was great. Thank you so much. It's really interesting considerations, and I love what you said about RPOs and RTOs, and the way you presented it and kind of linearly on that line was really very helpful, I think, for me and for the entire folks who are watching today. So thank you so much. That was great. So as promised at the beginning, I'm going to keep this extremely short. I just wanted to give you a little bit about Flosum. I think actually Keith did a great job talking a little bit about backup and archive and the composite backup, which was great. Just in a high nutshell, the great thing about Flosum is it's a fast, secure platform built for Salesforce backup, DevOps, and security orchestration. And the beauty of the company is that it's and the solution is that it's fully integrated into the Salesforce platform. And as we'll see here, it's really it includes built-in version control, continuous deployments, code analysis, branch management, analytics, all the things you need to really get a handle on DevSecOps, and really a strong, central repository for storing the Salesforce metadata, allowing developers to contribute changes, merge code, manage releases seamlessly. But hey, I mean, today we're here to talk about backup and archive. If you can jump 2 slides for me, Keith, that'd be great. All right, so Keith gave you a little preview, but as I said, we're talking backup and archive today. Really, it's very centered, very focused, centered right on allowing you to safely, securely, reliably automate Salesforce data and metadata backups, archives with the frequency that you need to be successful, and unlike traditional solutions. Flosum's backup and archive is really, focused on this concept of composite backup, which Keith went into before, retrieving new, changed, deleted data from Salesforce, joining it with data already in your backup container. And it's really a really terrific and innovative approach. Just quickly, want to dive in real quick to some of the kind of the key five business value items on the next slide, which is automating backups, reducing that minimal downtime that Keith was talking about earlier, any point in time restoration, data privacy, making sure that you're in sync with those legal requirements in addition to protecting your data, and of course the secure offsite storage, which is very crucial from a safety perspective. So, that's it in a nutshell, what Flosum brings to the table, and these key concepts that Keith touched about. I was corrected on one thing. Apparently, we don't have a Q&A box at the bottom. The Q&A goes into the chat. So, if there's any questions, we're happy to take them now, or what we can do is Keith and I can get to it after the presentation. I would encourage you to visit flosum.com, learn a little bit more about our solutions, learn a little bit more conceptually about our approach to backup and archive. It's something we're very passionate about here, and something that we've had a lot of success working with our customers to help them remain in compliance and remain protected and in a good spot. So, I think with that, we'll end it. It's 45 minutes past the hour. That seems like a good webinar length. Keith, I want to thank you so much again for joining and all your great insights. I think it was really great to really learn about the process and what to think about, and how to really execute properly on a backup and archive strategy.
Very good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Look forward to seeing you on future Flosum webinars. And remember to visit flosum.com for more information about upcoming events, our products, and solutions and philosophy. Thank you very much and have a great day.